Welcome into the roundtable. I'm Brad Wakai. That is my co-host Tyson Gentry. We're back with the penultimate episode of the NFL Draft Dive here, Tyson. I lied last week. No, we're not done with the NFL Draft Dive yet because we got a ton of news to update, and then later this week we're going to dive into all the NFL Draft gambling props and anything that kind of correlates with some things we may see on the first round on Thursday. So we got a big week ahead of us NFL draft wise. There's already some smoke being thrown out. People are starting to put together their mock drafts, Tyson. I mean, what have you been seeing? We're going to cover a lot, but like, what's been something that really resonated with you so far?
Oh, I think we're officially into like coach speak season when it comes to a lot of these guys. Like you get it around the combine, but you don't get it super heavy until we just want to draft a unique player. We just want to playmaker somebody, and then all of us go crazy. We're like, that's got to be Bijan, right? That's who they're talking about, or they're talking about Jackson Smith and Jigba or whatever. And then lines change off that. Like 2 weeks ago, CJ Stroud locked and loaded number one. Now it's Bryce Young, and you're crazy if you think otherwise. And then the CJ Stroud even top seven, and then trying to figure out if that news is coming from the Raiders are leaking it or whatever's going on.
I heard something the other day that the Bills apparently were the ones leaking negative information about Josh Allen before the draft because they wanted him to fall to them at wherever they took him. And then somebody I forget, it wasn't the GM, but they're like, yeah, so what was up with that Josh Allen stuff? And do you guys just ignore it? He's like, oh no, we leaked that. Like that was us. So there's like a ton of stuff going on. And before we get to the NFL draft, we will cover that, especially the Levis stuff, the Anthony Richardson stuff, and the CJ Stroud type of smoke screens that may be happening, Tyson. But to get us nice and warmed up, finally Aaron Rodgers was traded to the Jets. Like finally, the worst kept secret, it felt like, for the past however many months. And then all of a sudden it finally comes through today. And somebody was saying, one of these guys, these insiders, I think it might have been Rappaport, this is the week that it's going to get done. And it felt like it, right? Because he talked about draft comp, things like this. And so it finally happened, right? So the Jets get Aaron Rodgers, do a pick swap with their own 13th pick and the Packers' 15th pick. And they also get a 5th-round pick in this year's draft, the number 170th overall. Well, the Packers get that pick swap, so they move up to number 13, a 2nd-round pick in this year's draft, which is the 42nd overall pick, another 6th-round pick in this year's draft, and then a conditional 2024 2nd-round pick that can become a first if Rodgers plays 65% of the plays next season, which you expect to become a first-round pick. So in the end, man, it looks like the Packers did get their first-round pick that they wanted in by way of conditional. What do you think about this trade for both teams as it stands right now?
Let's start with the Packers angle. I think moving up to 13 is actually huge because if you look at the draft board with the Patriots sitting at 14, they have a lot of similar needs, right? Like they both could really use a wide receiver, although we've been saying that about the Packers for a while. It'd be hilarious if this is the year they take a wide out in round one. And then offensive linemen. And so they're able to jump New England and kind of have their pick of the litter of whoever's left sitting there at 13. You get the extra 2nd-round pick. You get a conditional second that probably turns into a first unless the dude decides he doesn't want to play next year. And you get out from under the contract, all for a guy that didn't want to play for you and you didn't want around. I think that's fantastic business. It took a long time, but I think it was well worth it for Green Bay. And I'm excited for the Jordan Love era. I can't handle it if these dudes get 3 straight Hall of Famers, but I think he's going to be pretty good. And like worst case scenario now for the Packers is he stinks and you go into next year with 2 first-round picks basically, and you're out from $60 million in cap. You don't have to extend Jordan Love. So I think the worst case scenario for the Packers isn't really all that bad.
I think this is great for both teams. It's one of those rare trades I think it will work out for both in the end because from the Packers angle, it looked like that marriage was really in its last leg here. Like, Rodgers has flat out said, I don't want to play in New York anymore. Or I don't want to play in Green Bay anymore. Felt like it was time for both parties to move off each other. And you already have Jordan Love, who's been sitting behind Aaron Rodgers. And whether or not this is going to be the Rodgers replaces Favre type of thing that you alluded to, that's only to be seen, right? Like, I think Jordan Love coming out of school, there were some things that you really liked about him. And the nice thing for him, and he was one of these classic quarterbacks that are a project. You don't really get the opportunity to sit and learn in the NFL anymore if you're taken highly. I think this is a great time for him to be learning from Aaron Rodgers, to be sitting back and learning how the NFL is played. And now he gets an opportunity with an organization that's going to want to make sure that they look like they're going to come out of this thing on top. And as far as the Jets goes, I'm curious what your thoughts on this. They needed to make this deal. Like they needed to go get a big time QB because they're so poor at drafting the position, as we've seen. Like it was enough was, oh, maybe this guy will work out for us, or maybe we can turn to the draft again. Like they needed to go get somebody. And if it doesn't work out for Aaron Rodgers, at least you went for it. That's the other thing too. Like if it doesn't work out, at least they were aggressive and tried something to win now. And I actually do think it's going to work for the Jets. But this was a great move for them to actually go and get him.
Yeah, and he's immediately now the best quarterback in Jets franchise history. He hasn't even played a snap, and I think we can comfortably say that. I'm being honest. Like the dude's a stud, and I think one thing about Aaron Rodgers and one thing kind of just about like greatness and these kind of people is he's gonna ball. Like if you don't think his petty streak it's a mile wide, and it goes forever. Like this dude is going to be pissed off next season. I think he's going to play well. But we've seen this now essentially 4 times in the last couple of years, right? Brady goes to the Bucks, they immediately win the Super Bowl. Stafford goes to the Rams, they win the Super Bowl. Russell Wilson dumpster fire in Denver, and then doesn't look like it's going to work with Deshaun Watson, but it's only been a year and they weren't really ready anyway, so jury's kind of out. Is this Jets team consistently as good as the Rams were before Stafford joined them? No. Are they as loaded as the Buccaneers were when Brady joined them? No. And now you're moving into the AFC. This is a super hard conference. So I think it raises the ceiling to like Super Bowl or bust, basically, is what they're saying. It's just I'm not there yet. It's going to take me some time to really kind of see this thing in action, but I think we need to pump the brakes just a little bit on. I'm placing New York Jets futures all over the place. I don't get it.
Especially if you do it now, because it was like you knew Aaron Rodgers was probably going to come to New York. Like you should have been placing this 3 months ago. Now the kind of like the momentum or the value of that ticket is like completely sucked dry. I mean, they're the second favorites now to win their division. Miami was second previously. Has really anything changed besides Aaron Rodgers has come over? Like it's still that same Dolphins team. The books expected Aaron Rodgers to be on the Jets anyway, but let's throw this back into like a football type of discussion. This is the wide receivers that Aaron Rodgers is going to be working with. Garrett Wilson, Allen Lazard, Mecole Hardman, Corey Davis, if he can stay healthy. This is a good group of wide receivers. And is it the best he's ever worked with? Probably not. No. Maybe, but it's up there, man. Probably top 5 for sure. Top 3, maybe, depending on how everything looks and depending if this offense works right and looks right. I think this is the expectations are warranted on this Jets team because if they had a quarterback last year, and again, this was last year, it's a new season, everything like that. But if they had a good quarterback in a healthy quarterback situation, that's a playoff team to me.
Yeah, but just playoffs isn't enough, and that's kind of that's how these moves go. And honestly, good for the Jets for going for it. And the other part of this whole discussion and equation is like now we get to find out if Robert Saleh can coach. Like that's a huge deal because if you pay attention when I listed those 4 teams, like we knew Bruce Arians could coach, we knew Sean McVay could coach, Nathaniel Hackett couldn't coach, who's by the way is back kind of where he belongs now as Aaron Rodgers' offensive coordinator in New York, but and then Stefanski. And again, the jury's out on both can he coach and is that going to work with Deshaun Watson. It takes a strong head coach to kind of just be able to move a personality in like Aaron Rodgers in 6 months because guys are showing up at the building. We know he doesn't show up to OTAs all the time. We know he might miss something and show up looking, a little grizzled, wife beater and all that. But like, as long as he's there, the packages have to be better. And they were limited last year in a lot of what they could do. Garrett Wilson had the most targets in NFL history as a rookie. That's incredible. And in and of itself, a lot of them weren't catchable, but this dude was working and getting open. Breece Hall coming back from the knee injury, like this offense could be explosive. The defense is super good. I think a lot of it comes down to like, what is Robert Saleh?
Does he show up looking like Nick Cage from Con Air, or does he do a little bit more suave type of look since he's in New York now? What do you think?
I mean, maybe like a Goodfellas thing, maybe,
okay.
Or yeah, something. I'm thinking like 60s mobster, 50s mobster, something like that.
He wears like the bolo, he's got the comb over.
Dude, this guy's going to show up with like the crystals and stuff and all that. Like he's not showing up looking cool, man.
Well, we definitely see. I'm sure there'll be a lot of content. I'm hoping they're Hard Knocks because they're one of 3 teams eligible. Give it to the Jets. I mean, with Aaron Rodgers there, I'd watch every episode.
Because it's them and the Bears. Um,
I think in the Commanders.
yeah, and it's the
like
only positive angle with Washington would be the sale of the team, and that doesn't make for good TV for 6 weeks. But Aaron Rodgers won't be there for 4 of the 6. So what are we doing?
Yeah,
We
good
just
point.
gonna watch Justin Fields play with DJ Moore?
Yeah, I don't know. We'll see. If it's the Jets, I'm watching, I think. But the other two,
I watch afterwards no matter what. Come on.
I know you do. Okay, let's transition from an established guy into this group of quarterbacks here in the NFL draft. There's been a lot of talk about them, a lot of chatter. You know, at one point, people were like, all 4 quarterbacks are going in the first 4 picks. And we say that like every good quarterback class, and it never happens because there's needs that these teams have, and there are really good players that these other teams need to take to address their needs. So it started off that way. And like you alluded to, CJ Stroud was going to be your number 1 pick when the Panthers went up and got him. Bryce Young, you know, he's too tiny. We nitpicked him apart. And then all of a sudden, here it comes back. Bryce Young. And he's expected to be the number 1 pick. And CJ Stroud is the quarterback that's been falling. There's been a ton of discussion around why that is. I don't really know if anybody knows right now, to be completely honest with you. I think it's all speculation. And then now there's major rumors that Will Levis is going to be the second quarterback taken and that the Texans are going to do it at the number 2 spot. Feels like the momentum has cooled on Anthony Richardson as well. Where are you at in terms of this quarterback's class as we stand right now?
Pretty close to where I started a year ago, to be honest with you. And that's one of the things I love the most about draft season is, I hate this saying, oh, this guy's tumbling down boards right now, because water finds its level. They just cut the tape on, they see more of you, they get to know you better, and then all of a sudden, you know, maybe you weren't a top 10 lock this whole time. Like we don't like you as much as we thought we did. And that happens every year. And then the other part, if you didn't think Will Levis was going top 5, you were nuts. We were saying that for a year and a half. Like the dude was made to play in the NFL. Is he going to be good? I have no idea. But prospect wise, like this is a dude with a huge arm. He's shredded. He's huge. He's mobile enough. Apparently he's really good in interviews. Like that's what gets guys drafted high. And he can do all those things. Bryce Young flipping back to first, like this is a master manipulator of space. Every single thing he does at a high level is high level NFL quarterback things. It's the like, oh, can he play in structure? Yeah, he can. But when he's outside of that structure, he's amazing because he has to do that a lot of times to make something happen. Good news for the Carolina Panthers. He's been doing it since 8th grade, probably, right? This isn't like a new thing. This is the way the NFL is going. Like, I still think CJ Stroud is probably the most pro-ready or second most behind Bryce Young here in this class, and that's kind of what was driving him up boards. He just doesn't have, I don't think, like a real true separator between him and other prospects where you can point to Will Levis and be like, dude, as long as you can throw the ball that far, I'll teach you. Like you learn the playbook, we'll get stuff to happen. With Bryce Young, it's like he's just so great outside of structure, and he's so great in tight areas and getting away from pressure, all those things, and just being special. And CJ Stroud doesn't really have that. So he's more pro-ready than Anthony Richardson. And now that's the discussion that we're having, right? Is do you want the potential to have Josh Allen, or are you okay Kirk Cousins? And that's not who he's going to be, but I'm just saying somebody that might play for 10 years and give you 4,000 yards a couple times.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about the Bryce Young flipping back to the first, I mean, we've been talking about Bryce Young as the number 1 quarterback for 3 years. And all of a sudden, wow, this guy's really small. It's like we knew he was small the whole time. You know, that hasn't changed. And I think it's that point where this is a long evaluation process and people start to overthink everything. Where do I know if Bryce Young's going to be great in the NFL? No, I don't really think anybody has an idea. Do I think that he has a chance to be great? Of course. Like the dude's been great at every single level he's ever played at. Like people thought he was going to be too small in the SEC when he showed up. He shredded that team. He shredded that conference up. That's just the type of player he is. Yeah, and he's been electric since the moment that he stepped in college football in the toughest conference that puts the most NFL players. You know, that puts the most players in the NFL. And yes, there's more NFL players going to have to play against, obviously, because there's teams who don't always have an NFL player at each position, and you know, the speed and the size and all of that of these opposing players he's going to play against is different. And there are concerns about his body, sure. But if I'm drafting number one, I'm looking for somebody who can be that guy, be the face of my franchise, and that's Bryce Young to me. And he's my QB1. My QB2 is Stroud. I personally see him falling. I see the discussion around it. I think when it comes down to it, Tyson, I would be super surprised if he's not the second quarterback off the board. And I'd get the Levis thing as you laid out, and it's somebody who's ran a pro style offense at Kentucky. Stroud and Bryce Young ran spread styles. And so they look at Levis, okay, he's going to get the verbiage. He's going to get the things probably quicker than some of these other guys who have to come in. And then if that is there and we can teach him how to be more accurate, that's a very, very tantalizing player, like a Josh Allen type, as you said as well, or any of these other guys. So I think really those are the three clear prospects that are going to go 1, 2, 3. And we lost our mind at the combine. Not us, but people lost their mind. Oh my God, Richardson! It's like there's nothing that we didn't know that he showed at the combine. Like, okay,
he threw that football in the ceiling. Remember at his pro day.
And did we think he was going to be the best athlete ever? No, we probably thought he was going to be like second or third. We were like, man, this guy's like Cam Newton. We didn't know he was going to be like more athletic than Cam Newton, but we thought he was up there. So that's just where I'm at in terms of this.
Yeah, and I think the one thing that we do every year with quarterbacks, and it's been happening for 4 weeks now. We're looking to next year already. I'm not in love with any of these guys. Last year, you didn't love anybody. You didn't love Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, and you were like, well, Bryce Young and CJ Stroud and Will Levis, and these guys are coming out. You can go back. It's always like when Spencer Rattler and Sam Howell were supposed to go 1-2. It doesn't always work that way. The grass isn't always greener, so you're sitting kind of at home as fans or people talking about it, right? And it's like, well, next year Caleb Williams is going to be special. We have no idea. We don't know because what did he do this year to like guarantee to you that he was going to be a great pro? He looks the part for sure. Didn't win a big game. Didn't look great in the big games. Had a lot of moments where it was like, oh man, he's got some stuff to work on. But we gloss over those because he's not coming out this year. So we focus on the huge plays. Marvin Harrison Jr. is awesome. We don't play the drops. Like we don't play any of the misplays because he's not coming out this year. Now we overanalyze all these guys. It's got to be tough, man, to be 21 and just being shit on for like 6 weeks.
At the same time, though, that's what comes with it, right? Like you're expected, that's just part. Like if you can't play, then you can't play in the NFL. They will replace you. So I mean, there's both sides to this coin. And like you said, there's some team updates we should get to because this is the interesting thing, and you alluded to. Well, maybe we're looking at next year, and that was something that the Houston Texans may have leaked. We're not pressed to take on a quarterback here. We're not scared to pass over one in this draft. And I see people, they're like, how can the Texans just pass over a quarterback in this draft? Let's put it this way, buddy. If you're not like interested in if none of these quarterbacks you think are going to fit what you want to do moving forward, because you've communicated with all of them, you've had them in the building, why would they not take a player that they rate high? Like, yes, he doesn't have the QB next to his name, but the guy could be an all-pro. The guy could be this. You're a Texans team who needs talent on your roster. Get the best players in here. And if you don't think that's a quarterback, I don't have any problem with them taking a Will Anderson. If they think it's Tyree Wilson, taking him. So for me, I think the discussion around it from all these talking heads, the Texans are stupid if they don't take a QB. Well, what happens if they do take a QB? Guy's a bust. And then they could have had Will Anderson and the dude's next, I don't know, Lawrence Taylor or JJ Watt or whoever. Throw it out there. Like, you see what I'm saying here?
Yeah, I got you. But the flip side of that is we've seen a lot of general managers, presidents, and head of player ops and all that stuff over the years who passed on these guys because they thought they had another year. And like we know DeMeco Ryans is going to be there. I don't know if Caserio and these other guys are going to be calling the shots in Houston a year from now because things change and they change quick. So maybe you have a guarantee now that like, man, if we suck again, that's all right. Until Caleb Williams doesn't want to play for the Texans because you've made an effort for 3 years now to not be competitive. Maybe that's not a spot Drake May wants to go play football, and you've put yourself into quite the hole and quite the predicament. To me, I don't think they should feel pressured to take quarterback, but I do think that there's a tangible thing that happens when organizations at least try to put a solid product on the field, right? Like they got the inverse of that when they lost the number one pick this year by winning in week 7 or week 18. But what happened to the Detroit Lions when they just said, "Man, we're sick of like just being the doormats. I don't even care if we make the playoffs. Just make everybody life harder." They got better quick, and that's you have to do that if you want to set a culture. D'Amico Ryans can't start losing.
Yeah, and there's some rumors too that Caserio, he may be looking elsewhere. Like maybe he's not interested in this Texans job anymore, which is intriguing. I don't know. Again, this is all draft stuff, type of stuff. Like, is it? Well, Caserio, he may draft us whoever because he doesn't even want to be here. It's who knows really. I mean, it seems strange.
How's he going to get another job if he just drafts somebody like that they don't like the owner doesn't want and the coach doesn't want? You don't think that gets out to somebody?
Right. Like it makes no sense. And why would he be involved in the hiring of D'Amico Ryans if he doesn't want to be there? Like, so I don't know. I mean, but to your point too, like maybe the owner does get a little antsy. And Caserio, he's like, look, and we already hired our guy, and D'Amico Ryans, you've been the issue here. And maybe he is like, or maybe he's moved off to something different. Like that's a possibility. So I see what you're saying too. Like me personally, if I'm the Texans, like I'm taking CJ Stroud at number 2. I think he's going to be good enough. I think he's a franchise quarterback, and that would go a long way for that Houston Texans organization. But if they don't want to deal with the agent, if they don't think if he doesn't meet what they're looking for, doesn't fit kind of what D'Amico Ryans wants to build there, I don't have an issue with them passing on a quarterback and taking a Will Anderson, who I think is going to be really good, or a Tyree Wilson, who, like the evaluators, they say his upside is insane.
Where are we at? I'm selling the agent rumor. Where are you buying or selling that one?
I think it's a combination of a bunch of different things with the Stroud drop.
Yeah, I just think like as far as the Texans go, like this dude, and if you don't know, apparently the Houston Texans are supposedly looking to avoid CJ Stroud because his agent is the same agent that Deshaun Watson has, and they obviously went through quite the battle with him. The dude represents like 44 players or something. Like he represents a ton of people, so they're gonna have to deal with him at some point. I don't think that's like you don't blackball somebody like that, and he's not Scott Boras, but like this isn't. You don't play around with somebody when there might be somebody in the third that you really really like.
Some other news is out there, team updates wise. Apparently, the Raiders there's a possibility that the Raiders could be aggressive and trading up, whether that's for a quarterback or somebody else. That's something there. Apparently, the Vikings, they are looking for a quarterback. Apparently, so whether they want to get aggressive and trade up to go get an Anthony Richardson's or somebody like that, or if they'll take a Hendon Hooker, that's a rumor out there as well. Anything else that you saw, Tyson, that from these teams that you want to share?
Well, as far as like team stuff goes, I don't have a ton. I just think that there's a lot of people in the NFL, like teams wise, that need a lot of different things. And in a draft class like this, where we're hearing there's only 15 prospects with a first round grade, everybody's going to report that like they want a quarterback, so they have to trade up to get the quarterback, obviously, because all the other prospects like aren't great enough to make you want to do that. I don't know if I'm buying the Vikings trading up that far. I think it'd be awesome, but it's a hell of a swing for a team that I don't think needs to take one like that at the moment. But as far as the rest of the teams go, man, I'm selling everything that I'm hearing right now.
Facts, absolutely, completely agree. Let's get into a polarizing guy here, Jalen Carter, and not. I mean, the off-field stuff. Like, if you have opinions on that, whatever the case may be, for what happened at Georgia, I'm saying polarizing in terms of we have no clue really where he could go, and it's interesting because this was supposed to be the number one guy in this class. It's funny to me that he was evaluated as the number one guy, and then all of a sudden now he's like the number 6, number 7, and I do think it has something to do, to be completely honest with you, how he showed up to his pro day in Georgia, where I think that's what bumped him down a lot of times. But it just is funny to me that this was like the guy, but this is the guy of the draft, and all of a sudden it's like, wait a minute, he's down here. So that raised my eyebrows a bit in terms of how does it compare from what these organizations actually view Jalen Carter as a prospect to what these evaluators in the media are doing and saying, and how they are putting the spin on Jalen Carter. I saw Peter Schrager today. He said Jalen Carter, this is what he heard over the weekend, that Jalen Carter's not falling out of the top 6. And so if we look at it here, Tyson, Panthers are going QB. Texans that seemingly are taking either Will Anderson or Tyree Wilson. Cardinals, you would think take one of the other two. Colts, probably QB. And from there, Seahawks or Lions. Those are the top 6. And there's some other people that have said the Seahawks won't take Jalen Carter, which is interesting. And there's some other people that said, maybe the Lions don't like him because they don't think he's going to fit and work with that. So obviously, based on what Peter Schrager is reporting that he's hearing, one of these teams is lying. Do you think Jalen Carter ultimately goes in the top 6?
Yeah, if he doesn't go 5 to the Seahawks, I'll be pretty surprised. Like we said it the moment the unfortunate news broke about the car crash and the death of the trainer and all that stuff and fleeing the scene and all the things that happened to him before the combine. Twofold on that. Like you mentioned him dropping. That had a little bit to do with it, but we're so far removed that that's not even really brought up. Like when people are talking about Jalen Carter, and if he was truly special, the NFL finds a way to sweep that thing out of the rug. 2, this is a Pete Carroll prospect through and through. Like, absolutely, this is a guy that celebrates his uniqueness, maybe, as Pete would say. And I think that's like, this is his guy. And if this is a guy that you look at as a true difference maker, especially playing the 3-tech, which is something that every team in the NFL could use, no matter how many of them that you have, this is a guy you have to go get, especially if you have 2 picks. Seahawks and Lions both have 2 picks. And if he makes it past those guys, there's just zero shot he makes it out of the top 10. So whatever your opinion is on Jalen Carter, the dude, ask Paris Johnson who the hardest guy at a block was in all of college football, and he'll tell you Jalen Carter. And it's the truth.
Yeah, I mean, and Jalen Carter, he canceled all of his pre-draft meetings with people outside the top 10. He got a guarantee from somebody, whether it's the Bears or the Eagles at 10, that if he's still there, they're going to select him. And so then it's all about, okay, well, who's going to take him before that? Because he's not falling out of the top 10. Like, I see people are like mocking him to like 12th at the Texans. I'm like, come on, like he's not. That's not a reality here. So I'm curious. I would be shocked if the Seahawks don't take him at 5. Me personally, that would be surprising to me. And quite honestly, let's move into this next team, the Cardinals here at 3. Apparently, they're ready to trade out. They're open for business. They're ready. If somebody wants to come up and get somebody, they're open to trading here. I think the draft hinges on what the Cardinals decide to do at 3, and if anybody wants to be aggressive. Would it shock you if Arizona was like, hey, we'll let somebody go up to 3, and then we'll be the ones to take a Jalen Carter?
I think so, just because of the way that Jonathan Gannon runs his defense. Like, if they get Jalen Carter, then all of a sudden Jalen Carter's like dropping into coverage on 30% of downs that he plays, and it's just kind of a misuse. I don't think Gannon loves having like good, strong, like 2-down defensive tackles, right? I think he wants like rotational guys throughout the entire thing. He doesn't want to be pigeonholed kind of into his defensive line rotation. He's a great prospect, Jalen Carter, but honestly, Brad, Chris Bauer has been waiting for a long time, and he got lucky kind of with the way that this thing fell when the Panthers jump up and go to 1, right? And then now we're hearing like the Texans might not even take a quarterback, and then you think you're safe at 3. If it's an extra 4th-round pick to ensure that you don't get jumped, especially by the Tennessee Titans, I think that's a risk that you have to take, because I think if 3's in play and Ryan Tannehill is apparently in play, then the Titans make a ton of sense as somebody that wants to move up and grab a quarterback, and it would be fairly sweet for them and super shitty for the Colts if they were able to pull it off, kind of a double whammy.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move into a position that's getting some buzz, and that's the running backs position, because coming into here, and Tyson and I've been plugged into this just because we love the prospects in this class, I think, more than other people who discuss the NFL draft may Bijan Robinson's obviously the bell cow, right? He's the number one guy, the generational talent. Peter Schrager, again, over the weekend said Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs, the running back from Alabama, will both go in the first round. That is interesting. We expected Jahmyr Gibbs to be the top running back in the second round, easily the second best prospect, according to both of us in this class. That surprises me that Gibbs could find his way into the first round. It absolutely does not surprise me that Bijan Robinson is going to be a first round pick. The question is how high. He's the favorite to be selected by the Atlanta Falcons at 8. That would personally shock me.
Oh, that'd be disgusting.
Let's talk about this class a bit, starting with those two, and then work our way on from there, because I actually do think this is a really good class.
Yeah, and I think like Gibbs especially is aided by the fact that the receiver class is super weak. outside of like Jackson Smith and Jigba would be probably a first round prospect in pretty much any receiver draft that he came out in. Whether that's top 15 or back half of the first is kind of to be seen, but depending on the class, right? But I mean, he's a good prospect. And then you kind of like, do you like Zay Flowers? Do you like Quentin Johnson? Take your pick, really, a wideout too, who you like the best. And Gibbs is a great pass catcher. So he's a weapon. I think he's helped out by the fact that there's only one or two first round wideouts. The class as a whole, man, it's ridiculous. And it's if you watch college football, you know, like this class has been coming for 3 years. Like this was everybody in the country heard about Tank Bigsby as a freshman. And now this is RB5 off the board. We've known about Zach Charbonnet for 3 years, right? Since he left Michigan. Like we were confused there. Gibbs at Georgia Tech. Bijan's obviously been the one who was chosen since he was 16 years old. Roshan Johnson is a stud. Devin A-Chain is a track star and a really good player. Sean Tucker weighed in 209 today, kind of surprised some people. And he's another track guy. Like this is a draft class, and this is what I truly think is going to happen is Bijan's going higher than people think. Whether that's in the top 10 or not remains to be seen, but everyone mocking him 26 is going to be eating their words come draft time because he's a difference maker. I think Gibbs probably finds his way in the back end of the first round, early second. I'd really like to see a team like Miami trade up to go get him. I don't think the gap is that wide between Gibbs and Charbonnet, but I don't think the gap between Charbonnet and RB7 in this draft class is drastic enough to justify a run on these guys in the second round. And so I think we're going to see some third round guys, and then a lot of guys go early day 3. And when you look at it, you think fourth round running back draft capital probably not going to hit. Like this is you're in Michael Carter territory. Like it'd be nice if we can get 2 years out of you, whatever. This is going to be a Aaron Jones, Austin Eckler type class, I think, because they're all so talented and they're all so different. Like, would you be shocked if Tyjae Spears is the second best running back in this class?
No,
Dwayne
it's
McBride.
extremely deep.
Yeah,
No, I like McBride a lot.
Guys like that, and they're going fourth round. So I think the NFL is looking at that and going, okay, if I don't get one of these two, I can wait because there's only 10 interior offensive linemen that I like. There's 12 tackles. There's 18 defensive linemen, whatever the case may be. And if they're on the board, I'm taking them before the running back because these running backs are going to be there. And so don't be surprised if there's not a lot of guys that go when Ken Walker got drafted, when Breece Hall got drafted. But that doesn't mean that the class is worse. In fact, I think it's quite a bit better.
Absolutely. And if we want to talk about Gibbs getting into the first round somewhere, the teams that I'm seeing, Vikings at 23, maybe. I mean, we know the Dalvin Cook thing. He's been banged up. It's been frustrating for them, I know. And that contract, they'd be looking to move off of him. Cowboys at 26, always interesting. Pollard's injured. Zeke thing's over. Buffalo Bills at 27. Yes, they have Damian Harris.
They
can't do it. But like you said, pass catcher, another weapon. And I know they kind of.
Well, what's the point of James Cook?
Right. Bengals at 28. They're looking to definitely move off from Joe Mixon. Saints at 29. Are they ready to be done with Kamara? Then obviously the Eagles at 30. If they don't draft Bijan Robinson, is that an option for them? And then Chiefs at 31. That would surprise me. But those are your teams late in the first. I mean, there's definitely teams that you can see talking themselves into Jahmyr Gibbs, be like, oh, it's late first round. Let's pick them.
Yeah, and one thing to keep in mind with Jahmyr Gibbs, Philly is super common as a landing spot for him at 30. I don't think Jalen Hurts is a check down kind of guy enough. Like this is a guy now you'd have to scheme touches for in the pass game with all those weapons in Philly. I don't see it. And then the other part, I don't know if he can carry a backfield. I think he's 5'9" and 3/4, 5'10" and 199 pounds. Basically a 30 BMI is what it takes as far as checking the box for bell cow running backs. And he either just barely got there or just barely missed it, but he's really close to the borderline. And I don't know if that's a guy that you trust if you're Minnesota to take over for Dalvin Cook, who was hardly ever healthy. If that's a guy that you pair with Pollard because it feels a little redundant. If that's a guy that you just maybe you punt on James Cook because I might at this point. But the Chiefs at 31, man, with the lack of receiving weapons at the moment, and like we've seen them do it before, and they miss pretty hard on Clyde Edwards-Helaire, but like this would be fun. It'd be a ton of fun if Jahmyr finds his way to Kansas City.
5'9", 199. That's
Yep.
his official. That's coming from there, from the combine. Eventually be a plus starter. Next gen stats like some, Lance Zierlein has him in the first, second round. So that's your angle on that there. All right, Tyson. Let's talk about this offensive line class because it's for a while. Peter Skoronski was the guy, it seemed, or Paris Johnson was the guy. It was like those two battling it out, and now people have started talking themselves into, well, Skoronski has small arms. Well, maybe he's more of a guard. Can we really justify taking somebody that early? Like Quentin Nelson wasn't selected high in the draft, and Zach Martin wasn't really good. And so we're seeing a lot of these different names get thrown around. Osiris, the guy from
Right.
Tennessee that I'm forgetting right now, but
Darnell Wright.
yeah, Darnell Wright, Broderick Jones from Georgia. And so we're seeing a bunch of different names right now. I honestly think it's going to come down to who the team sees fitting their system the most, fitting their scheme. I think it's that flat of a top of a draft class, maybe flatter than we've seen in a while.
Well, the other part is positional versatility. How often the NFL is littered with guards that kicked out to tackle. Like pretty much every guard probably played tackle at some point in their life, right? Not a lot of not a lot of like tackles kick into guard. It's a different position. It takes different body types and movement skills and all that kind of thing. Skoronski's played guard. Paris Johnson can play guard if needed. Who's drafting at 10? The Philadelphia Eagles, who have a hole at guard, right? And the Bears need help everywhere. I just think, to me personally, it makes a little bit more sense to go with the positional versatility given the draft class is so flat. But the other interesting thing to me, I thought the NFL had caught up that right tackles were just as important as left tackles in scheming things, but it hasn't because Darnell Wright took forever to rise up these draft boards because people were like, he can only play right tackle. That's okay because that's where the dominant pass rusher is going to line up on most snaps. So I think that's something that might even give him an edge over some of these guys that we're not super sure about because the guy's solid and all these guys are solid, right? We're unsure. There's not a Joe Thomas in this draft class.
You're
We're
right.
just hoping there's like a Jake Long. That's kind of your goal here. You want to get 10 years out of one of these guys. For me, give me the guys that can play guard and tackle and that I can get on the field right away.
And you mentioned this with Peter Skoronski, like he's going up against elite guys at the Big Ten level, pass rushing each week, and he did a hell of a job on him. I think we're, again, one of these cases we're nitpicking this guy. I think he's really good. Me personally, I would like to have him if he does fall. If the Eagles are thinking, hey, we need the offensive lineman, as an Eagles fan, I would love Peter Skoronski. That would be awesome to me. And so I see these different names. I see some people, just like, well, we're not sold on him. And it just is always funny to me that the conversation surrounding this, right? Whether it is the media, whether it's the mock drafters or whoever, or people that discuss this for a living, I'm always curious what their idea of a player is compared to what the actual NFL is, and that's what we try to sift through, right? And we'll discuss this more as we get closer to our actual betting episode, as we're trying to make people some money. But that's what you have to kind of figure out: who's getting fed a bunch of shit, and then who's actually like keeping everything close to the vest. Because the whole negatives on Skoronski could just be, yeah, we just want him to fall to like 12.
And that's why when I started the show, I said nobody ever falls down a draft board because Todd McShay doesn't have the same intel that Bill Belichick has, or they don't view these guys the same way as the NFL. So when we say falling down a board, we mean relative to Mel Kiper. We don't mean what the NFL had in mind all along. Like we find out real quick on Thursday what position groups are stronger than we were kind of leading on up to the draft, and which ones are people comfortable waiting on. Like tight ends loaded, man, but are like maybe you're okay taking Laporta, and you don't really need Michael Mayer.
And speaking of that, I mean, is there any players that you're seeing, like, we do the risers, fallers? I mean, let's talk about some risers that potentially could happen here. I mean, one for me that I'm seeing is Christian Gonzalez, and a lot for the majority of this process. Devin Witherspoon. We both have him as our cornerback one, our defensive back one. There's a lot of people saying that it maybe actually be Christian Gonzalez. Like he was a can't miss 6 prospect from Next Gen Stats who have their little whatever and then put out their 6 can't miss guys based on whatever
Good
they
track
input.
record though.
Really good track record. And so is that a guy that teams view more favorably than maybe the media, or maybe something like that? And he's going to be a riser. Apparently, there's a possibility that he gets drafted at 7 to the Raiders, which I know was kind of mocked there for a while. Then he was falling back a bit. Apparently, they're saying that if he may get selected at 6 to the Lions now, so he's flying up boards at the moment.
I got Brian Branch in that spot just because safety is such a hard position to kind of tell how their game's going to translate from college to the NFL because they're asked to do so many things in college that like you don't rely on that heavily or play to play that you that you do in the NFL. And so this guy like starts out mock draft season as like a second rounder, and like if this guy goes top 20, I'm not going to be shocked. I won't be super surprised. A lot of these corners actually I think have risen up the board, and obviously he's a safety. But I'll give some love to my buddy Drew Sanders. This is like I think the best linebacker in the class, and he's kind of generating more buzz as the draft gets closer, which seems kind of on par to what we were just saying, that it was like you never draft linebackers in the first, blah, blah, blah. But Trenton Simpson is lacking something. To'o from Alabama, like good player, just not the same. Sewell, Henley, like whoever you want to, Diabate, whoever it is, at linebacker. Like I just think he's a level above everybody else.
Another guy for me that I see rising, Luke Musgrave, tight end from Oregon State. This is somebody that we pegged, super impressive, really fits this modern era of tight end, can run up the seam. And he's not quite a blocker, but that's not somebody necessarily that you really need in today's day and age, depending on how you want to use him in your offensive style. And Anton Harrison, tackle from Oklahoma, he wasn't looked favorably by a lot of people when he was coming out of the draft this year. And I think that people are starting to see his talent and like, Mel, maybe we can mold this guy, because I've seen his name looked at as somebody who's like, oh, okay, actually this guy's much better, and just starting to kind of build the rankings of these top 150s and top 50 prospect lists. So Anton Harrison's a guy to keep an eye on as well. Maybe late first, definitely early second for me at the offensive tackle position.
Yeah, he's getting a lot of love. And Charlie Campbell over at Walter Football sure likes him a ton, and that's the most accurate mock draft over the last pretty much decade. And I just want to give some love before we get out of the risers to my wideout too, Zay Flowers, because I think people are catching up.
And let's get to the fallers then. Just some people that we've seen, Tyson, that potentially could fall. Somebody to keep an eye on. Maybe, there's whether or not it's team based, whether or not it's need based, some guys that could be falling. And we talked about this a little bit, but I mean, Quentin Johnston is like the biggest name that we see could potentially fall. Like they're talking like he went from wide receiver 1 this class to not even be a first round draft pick. Whether that's warranted, whether it's not, we both don't think this is a good draft class for wide receivers. And so it doesn't shock us that there may be a lot fewer receivers taken in this first round than expected.
Yeah, and I had QJ at wideout 5 when we did our positional rankings. And it was a battle to get him at 5. He's a little dude in a big guy's body, and that I don't know how that's going to translate. It's a lot more fun when you have a little guy that feels like he's 6'5". It's not quite as fun when your 6'4" guy feels like he's 5'9". But he didn't measure as well at the combine as people expected or anything like that. So I think he's just kind of like the tape's not impressive. He's just kind of finding where he should be, I think. For my fallers, man, this one sucks, but I think Joey Porter Jr. is like from the beginning of draft season till now, he's not looked on as favorably or talked about the way that he was. And look, man, give me an aggressive corner. Give me the long arms and somebody who wants to get after you and set the tone. I think that's super important. I think the lowest he goes personally would be the Steelers at 17. Like this screams Mike Tomlin to me. But this was a top 10 guy before the college football season. He didn't really do anything, I didn't think, during the year to warrant like a Keely Ringo level drop. But he's certainly going to go closer to 20 than he is to 10.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that one to save me a little bit of pain as a Penn Stater. But I've been seeing that too. It's interesting, right? Because it's really been nothing. Interviewing well. It's, he actually was more athletic than people thought. And it's just, the other people may go higher and higher. And that's just what happens in the draft sometimes. Like there's, whether it's a fit or not. And, Commanders at 16, huge need a cornerback. Like that could be somebody that looks at him, whereas, the Patriots, they don't really draft cornerbacks high like that. And so people had a mock there for a long time, but it was like, yeah, but that doesn't really make sense, So
it's not even
it's not even how they play. Exactly. And another faller for me, Michael Mayer, the tight end from Notre Dame. I actually like him a lot, but there's legit concerns about his athleticism, whether that's warranted or not. I think he's the most complete tight end in this class in terms of both blocking and catching. But if you're looking at kind of like the modern tight end, like a Travis Kelce, like, a Kyle Pitts, he doesn't really fit that mold. He's a less athletic Gronk, somebody who can block and run, a way less athletic George
He's
Kittle.
supercharged Hunter Henry, basically.
And that's not going to get you a top 20 draft selection. Now, he could do it still, but this was a guy that we're talking about 15, 14, 13 to the Packers potentially. And now he's kind of on the outside of the first round, potentially maybe sliding to the second, which would be shocking to me.
Yeah. I think that he still has – he should go in the first round. I just off talent. One of my followers and steadily throughout this whole thing, and it was a guy that I did not like watching. I know you didn't like watching, but for different reasons. Mozzie Smith from Michigan. Defensive tackle. He started this process, and it was like he might be a back-end first-round guy. Now he's been jumped. Like Kalijah Cansey is consistently looked at in higher regard than him. But to go from 20 when the process starts to probably in the second round, it's not great. And I don't love the tape, man. I don't think he does anything like super well to separate him from that second-tier guys, because it's like, when this process started, he was close to Brian Breesy, and he was close to Kalijah Cansey. And now those guys, through combine testing and interviews and stuff, have either stayed the exact same. In Breesy's case, he fell a little bit, but Cansey obviously shot up boards, and Smith was the inverse.
Yeah, and to your point, Matt Miller from ESPN now just put out his latest mock draft. He has him going to 58th to the Cowboys. So quite a fall there. Any other fallers you want to discuss?
They love former like 5-star high school recruits who play for Michigan. That's like the Cowboys' MO.
Especially like when Jerry was running the show too. So many Michigan guys there. I don't know. Yeah, it's very interesting. But any other fallers that you've noticed? Any big names or anything like that you think could definitely kind of drop it, would shock you?
Not really. I think I was way too high on Sean Tucker to start the process, and that's just like, I really like watching the guy, but he got flagged at the combine. Rumors that it's a heart thing. The running back from Syracuse, if you don't know, never ended up running his 40, and so for a guy that was basically touted as a track star to not show up and run a 40, he benched 29 reps today at his pro day, and like that's impressive. But we already knew he lived in the gym. Like that's kind of his whole persona. That's his whole thing. I'm always working. But to not run today, like this dude was weak during the pre-draft process. Like everything he had going on, he didn't make me feel secure in the fact that he's going to be a good pro.
And so we'll finish with this. Like any other news that have been coming out, like things to pay attention to, storylines, yada yada, things like that.
Derrick Henry's not going to be on the Eagles. Let's start there.
Right. So they were saying, the Eagles were trying to trade for Derrick Henry and really fleece the Titans, just like they did with A.J. Brown last year. Like that was always interesting to me, that really like that the new general manager is going to trade with the Eagles again. Interesting. For me, like here, maybe it's not necessarily news, but something I'm definitely keeping an eye on is if the Raiders and the Colts get antsy. Because that could be a huge thing. Like this could completely flip the draft. I think there's going to be a ton of picks, a bunch of trades. I know a lot of people expect that. So the Texans, I mean, again, if they're not necessarily enamored with any of these quarterbacks, like they can sit back, relax, and just field some potentially king's ransom type of things. So somebody goes up and gets to 2 to take either their pick of Levis, Anderson, or CJ Stroud, or Richardson, or Stroud. So that's going to be curious. Whether the Raiders want to do that or not, whether it is the Colts, and you alluded to at the beginning, like, do they get antsy kind of looking around in their division? Like, okay, well, the Titans are aggressive, yada, yada. I'm curious to see if it's one of those teams, or if Seattle takes an Anthony Richardson at 5, which would be surprising to me.
Yeah, that would be sweet though. I think I would be on board for that. I think that'd be a ton of fun. I'm really curious. I want some Dalton Kincaid smoke. That's what I want, because I want to see, the NFL has consistently missed on move tight ends in the first round over the last couple of years. Like, we really want Kyle Pitts to be good. Unfortunately, the jury's out. Like, I still think this dude's a monster, but we haven't got to see it. And then, like, as you go back through time, like David Njoku, Noah Fant, pretty much any first round tight end, OJ Howard, like none of these guys have turned into anything. I think Kincaid's different, but is the NFL like, man, you can't take a move tight end in the top 15. That's just not the way the game works anymore. Like we missed the boat. This thing's kind of past us, and now it's just better to wait and hope you hit on a third round guy. I personally, I think this dude is like top 10 talent. And I think that we're going to get some pretty fun Dalton Kincaid stuff in the coming week.
Yeah, me too. I'm definitely paying attention to that. This is a guy that we both extremely like. Obviously, as you said it, I'm wondering where he's going to go. Texans at 12. That's somebody to keep an eye on. Like they need talent. Like I think if you're the Texans, to be honest, you can't think about necessarily, okay, we need to find this hole or we have this specific hole. You just need talent on your roster. Like you need to go get some blue chip guys to rebuild this thing quickly. And I don't think anybody really is too high for what they're looking for, to be honest. Like if it's the number one tight end, you get the number one defensive end, you get whoever. As long as you start getting these number one guys, like you're going to have some talent on that roster pretty quickly.
I'm sure they'll draft somebody too high. We'll be back here on Monday after the draft and be freaking out.
Anything else? I know you can plug our chalkboard because we're going to be getting ready for our NFL betting coverage. A lot of stuff we got to get into there.
Yeah, and that is the Chalkboard app. It is on the App Store. It's on Google Play or wherever you download your apps. The group name is The Roundtable, and Brad said it. It's a kind of a little community we built kind of like Discord. We got golf bets, NHL playoff bets, NBA playoff bets. We're going to have NFL draft stuff. And obviously anything else you can think of will be in there as well. Brad had a bunch of soccer plays today, a bunch of baseball plays, and all that stuff is super fun. And we just want people in there and sharing with us what you have going on. And maybe we'll tail you or fade you if we don't like the play. But the NFL draft, there's not a lot of better opportunities to make a paycheck in 4 hours. Just start with $25 in live bet and keep rolling this thing over. And it can be pretty profitable.
In the meantime, like, subscribe, and share the show. We really appreciate the support. If you guys do it, whether you're liking us on YouTube, if you're watching us there, or if you are giving us a rating and reviewing on Spotify or Apple, or if you listen to your podcast, it really helps us out and it goes a long way to help others find our show. You stay connected with us on social media. You can send us a tweet at TRT_pod, or you can contact us on Instagram and TikTok. They are both at _ the roundtable pod _ We'll be back. We like we said, we got a ton more. We got the NFL betting draft stuff getting ready to roll. NBA playoffs is in full effect. It's been pretty good so far for us, Tyson. Not going to lie there. And just a bunch of fun storylines we get ready for the second round. So big week. We're excited for it. We hope you are too. And we will speak to y'all next time, guys. Peace.